Well, thank you for being here today. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. We're thrilled to have you. We're thankful for this meeting of our bicycle retailer focused e-bike safety and standards panel. This quarterly platform provides a chance for industry experts to meet and discuss and address retailer risks, concerns, and best practices regarding lithium-ion batteries and e-mobility devices, safety standards, and compliance. The NBDA, we are extremely thankful to the panel members who have volunteered their time and expertise to this discussion. Tremendous energy has gone into making this a platform, not just for retailers, but the industry at large. We truly believe that working united, this collective conversation will propel us all towards continued growth in e-bike sales and participation with limited risk and safety for all. Panel members, thank you again for being here. If you're joining us as a viewing participant, we welcome your participation throughout the event. And how you can do that is place questions into the chat function, or you can use the Q&A function. Panel members and the NBDA will monitor this, and some questions will be answered live, and others will be addressed back via the chat function. This is an opportunity for you to ask and be part of the conversation, and we really do urge you to place those questions into chat. On today's agenda, we have a discussion recap of the recent EPA Medium Format Battery Conference and 2 additional exploration topics. So how the forum will progress today is I will introduce the topic, and our panel members who have volunteered to speak on the items will talk, and then we'll answer any questions from our attendees. So our first topic is battery recycling and e-bike sustainability, such an important topic. And these are insights from the EPA conference. At the recent EPA conference on medium format battery labeling and recycling, several stakeholders gathered to discuss e-bike battery sustainability. And the question is, what were some of the key takeaways from the event, and how can the e-bike industry contribute to improving battery recycling practices moving forward? Such an important conversation. Mark Bullish is here, and he will get us started with a presentation and his feedback and lead us off. Mark, thanks so much for being here.
You're very welcome, and I just need to share again. All right, hopefully everything works here. Can you see?
Not yet. I still see you, but that's okay. We'll try again.
Oh, it's because it's asking me which one I want to share.
Wonderful. I think we're going there now. Perfect, Mark. We see it.
And it's in the full screen mode?
It looks excellent. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for the opportunity to speak. I'll keep this, feel free to ask questions as we go. I much more prefer a dialogue on this, so don't feel that you have to wait till the end. Please ask questions as they come up. And I apologize if I'm shifted a little bit here and not looking at the camera. I have 3 screens here, and it popped up on my far left screen. So just so you know that. So I was going to cover the EPA's medium format meeting that was held at the end of January. So I'll get right into it. There we go. Makes me roll it down. So that meeting was held January 27th and 28th of this year in Washington, D.C. Unlike some of the meetings that the EPA has been hosting, this one was in person only. I know there are some later meetings that are coming up that I'll mention here too on the large format sizes, and those will be webinars, at least at this point right now. Some of those, well, they were both rescheduled. They were supposed to be one at the end of February and then another one in April, if I remember right. Those both got postponed, and I saw that they were just recently rescheduled. I forget the day off the top of my head, but I can look that up if we need to. I tried to do a count while we were there, but people were coming and going. But roughly, based on the number of tables and the people at the tables, I estimate there were probably about 60 or so attendees that were at the meeting. Obviously, the EPA and their consultants were there. There were a number of people, including myself, from industry and the trade associations that represent them. There were battery recyclers, NGOs that were there, officials from state and local governments, the Department of Energy and the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA, was there as well. Important there because DOE talked a lot about grant opportunities and the efforts that they're working on. and then PHMSA is responsible for the movement of these materials when they go, either whether they're brand new coming into the market or leaving the market as end of life batteries. Others in the transportation sector, I note that there was somebody there from one of the firefighters organizations. I think it was the Uniformed Firefighters Association. I didn't get that level of detail in my notes. And then there were some retailers that were there as well. So EPA had I'll call it a requirement or a request from Congress to look into this activity on the best practices around labeling for collection and recycling. Um, so initially it was more focused on the labeling, but it has somewhat morphed into just a general discussion on collection and recycling, and then obviously the labeling component is part of that. And what EPA did is they broke the effort out starting last year, and it's supposed to continue into the middle of this year. They broke it out in 3 different sections. Well, technically 4 sections, but it seems like the 2 large formats are getting put together now because of some of the delays. The first track that EPA did starting in June. Well, it started in March, but the first face-to-face meeting was in June of last year, and that was dealing with the smaller or the portable type batteries. And these are the everyday things from small as batteries that go into like a watch or a wearable electronic device, up into what we still consider portable. And we can talk about with like the e-bike batteries, they bridge the gap to some extent between the small and portable types and the medium format. So the larger types would get into the medium, whereas the smaller types would be more in the portable type. And generally, the way to think about this is that if you can carry it by hand without really being out of breath or at all, so obviously like an electric vehicle battery or something like that is not something that the average person could carry. Um, those are considered large format. Medium format are the ones that are not something that you would normally carry around. Certainly, you can't put it in your pocket or wear it on you. It's big enough that you could still carry it, but it's small enough that uh, it's not. You don't need like a fork truck or something to pick it up. So it's divided into those different areas. So what I'll focus on here is the medium format, which is the meeting that was just held in this past January. That is coming out of the small format sessions. And then, as I mentioned, the large format sessions are scheduled to begin uh, shortly. And interestingly, just in the last couple of days, EPA will be they put out a notice of a summary of the medium format. And if I remember right, that is tomorrow now. Um, Excuse me for not knowing the exact dates. I was in China last week and I lost my computer because it got hacked and didn't have access to my computer for a couple of days. So was just getting caught up here. Um, So the numbers that are on here were the previous dates as far as when those were supposed to happen. So the large format was originally scheduled to begin on February 11th. That got delayed until later this month. So the day 1 sessions started out with an update on uh, what's going on in the different states in the US. And we did talk a little bit about Canada as well. And I can certainly talk about that if anybody is interested. Um, but it was talking about the extended producer responsibility bills that have been introduced in 2025 and the model legislation that PRBA has looking at that. And that legislation is focused on the small portable and then the medium format together. The large format ones are carved out into a separate type of legislation, mainly because of just the differences in the large format as far as how the consumer might interact with them in the market and how they might be disposed of at the end of life. So for larger batteries, most people don't interact with those, whereas with the portable types and the medium format types, the consumer can and often does interact with those batteries. So they have a little bit of a different model. Um, So the group also looked just in general at policies that would be beneficial to improving collections. And this gets into, and part of this is also separated between the large format and the other types as far as what works. So the model bill has a requirement for a stewardship organization to manage the end of life of the batteries. And the reason that is different compared to the large format types is that often when you're dealing, well, not often, always, when you're dealing with the smaller types, you may have as many as 2, 3, 400 different people that are classified, or entities that are classified as producers when they bring those products into the market. And managing all those different producers is much more of a challenge than it would be, say, with the large format batteries, where you may have a dozen or so producers only. So it becomes a very different model. So there was a lot of discussion on that. Um, and then just different policies involving, who is the producer, how can a stewardship organization make sure that they are receiving the funding that is necessary from the producers that are putting those batteries on the market, who's responsible. Is it possible for entities such as retailers to offset that burden of being a producer, and like what circumstances those might be? So there's a lot of discussion that was around those areas, just general policies, and a lot of it just deals with the model legislation and what is in the model. Um, we also spent quite a bit of time on just general barriers as far as what prevents a consumer from returning a battery, putting it in a box. So like convenience metrics, where they go, how they get their information, items like that. And then also motivation. So what would be the motivation for a consumer to return a battery, or for a business or anything like that? So we talked a lot about opportunities there, and then also got into just general standards that could be around, that we could potentially leverage, or in some cases, which would be a longer term proposition, creating standards. So that is certainly a viable option, but certainly looking at existing standards. And this morphed a little bit into not just on the collection and recycling side, but also on the safety standards, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. A lot of those standards seem to be going hand in hand, in legislation today. And a lot of it revolves around the fires and the incidents that are being seen. And in many cases, one of the solutions for that is the proper management of those batteries at end of life, so that they can't get to a condition where they could potentially cause a fire. So I know there are a lot of standards that are out there dealing with the products when they're new, and testing and certifications that are required, but there are also some that deal with them during use and end of life as well. So the second day, or which was a half day, a little over half day, there were some breakout groups that we had, and those groups dealt with 4 different topics. The first one being, how do we get to a broader participation in recycling in a program in the different states, or a municipality, like in the case of the District of Columbia, that does have is currently the only legislation for all the battery types that's active right now, and I'll cover that in a minute. We also had a group on the logistical concerns. So that gets into, how do you move the products? There's obviously a lot of requirements that are involved, and whether it be for safety or for marking or anything else around those areas. So it was getting into some of those logistical concerns, and even some of the pain points that are involved with those. Um, so that's what that group covered. Uh, there was a third group on expanding the collection footprint. Historically, when you look at a collection program that gets put in place, they don't start at 100% on day one. They work their way up. And then there are best practices that were discussed in that group about how do you get to that point where you can maximize your collection uh, footprint and collection rates. And then the last breakout group dealt with education and outreach. Now, I don't have the summaries for these different groups. I only participated in the third group. And I do expect that EPA will be reporting out on this tomorrow during their report out of the medium format session. And a lot of these items, to be honest, were very similar to the portable and small batteries. Um, There are a lot of similarities between, I'm just going to call all the portable and small portable, just to make it quicker. But there are a lot of similarities in the portable and the medium format batteries, but there are some differences as well. And one of the big differences is that when you think of something like an e-bike battery, it does tend to be a little bit larger than most of your portable battery types. So when you go to like a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a place like that that collects all different types of products, batteries being one of them, um, most of your e-bike batteries are not going to fit in those boxes. You know, the box will be about the size of uh, like a big FedEx shipping box or something like that, and they'll have a slot in the box that you can then take your portable batteries, put them in the plastic bag to insulate them and put them in the box. While an e-bike battery most often, in most cases, won't fit into that box and through that hole. So there are some requirements and certainly some differences in the collection program that need to be, observed for the medium format types. Um, so So going forward, they also talked, once the groups got back together, we talked about the different recycling challenges that are out there today. And that also got into the logistics of moving the batteries from the consumer through a collection point. And then if there is any consolidation that happens with those batteries, we talked about sorting, we even talked about processing. There was a lot of information presented on, what are the best practices today, how those batteries are managed, and the pain points that they have. Um, and then all the way up through the recycling technologies themselves. How are these batteries being recycled? What happens with them? Where do the materials go? So that was all discussed during the session as well. Um, there as we move into the medium format category, it's a little less of a focal point than it is, say, in the large format, but certainly there is something being developed and discussed in state legislation that talks about the hierarchy of what you do with the batteries at the end of their first life in some cases. For most of your portable battery types, they really don't have a second use, whether or not they're rechargeable. The consumers hang on to them for a long time, and at the end of their life, those batteries are spent in the true case, and in that they don't have any useful life left. But I'm going to go all the way to the other end. When you get into the large format batteries, many of those batteries may still have 60, 70% of their initial capacity in them. They may not be useful for an automobile, but they could be used in, say, grid storage or other applications. And then when you get into the medium format, that discussion is starting to happen as well. Is theoretically, are some of the e-bike batteries, for example, could they be used in other applications? So that is a discussion that is starting to happen in the medium side, or like the e-bike batteries. And I expect that there will be a lot more discussion on that as we go forward. And then there was a, a presentation that was given by the Department of Energy regarding their funding activities. And a lot of that funding right now is on collection infrastructure and recycling infrastructure for enticing new recycling technologies or to bolster existing technologies that exist today. And then, as I mentioned, on the collection footprint too, DOE is looking at funding opportunities in that area as well. And then we had our wrap up, and then again, like I mentioned, tomorrow EPA will go into much more depth, I expect, than they did during their initial wrap up, where they just talked about basically what I summarized here, saying what we walked through over the day and a half, and when we could expect a report out on that. So I put a summary here. These are my personal opinions on this, and for those that may have been there, I certainly welcome any uh, additions to this as well. I thought the meeting was very well attended and there was a lot of good representation by a cross-functional group of stakeholders. We were dealing with everyone from the early parts of the design of the products through the use of the products, through the retail sale of those products, and then, of course, the collection and recycling infrastructure as well. So there were people in the room that represented all those different stages of the product's life from the beginning to the end. Um, and as I mentioned, there didn't seem to be a lot of differences between the portable and the medium types, which in a lot of ways is why they're together in the legislative model. But we did note that there were some differences. And that's what I mentioned here, that there is a recognition that there are some differences dealing specifically with the collection locations. Where again, the Lowe's and Home Depots won't be taking e-bike batteries. Well, they could, but at least as of right now, they're not. That is something that is more specialized for, say, like an e-bike shop, for example. So that the collection locations and the accessibility were well noted. There was also a lot of discussion about the fire safety. It's not that the portable types can't have fire incidents; they do. But it does seem like that as we've gotten into the more of the medium format size, you get more energy into a container, that, the battery in this case, and there does seem to be, at least, whether there are more incidents or it's more publication of the incidents is debatable. But so we talked a lot about fire safety, and that's where we got into the standards around safety as well. And again, that deals with everything from the sale of them, the storage, the use, as well as the transportation and end of life. There were definitely recognition that, at least at this time, the medium format type batteries they're less common than the portable types like your double A's and triple A's, but there is definitely a recognition that this area is seeing huge growth and much more availability. You go back 10 years and it was the e-bike market was certainly smaller than it is today. So there was a recognition that there is a lot of growth in that area, and it needs to be certainly noted. And then there was also recognition that the transportation of these types, because they have more material in them, they go above and beyond the the thresholds where the portable types can get a little bit of relief as far as when they're transported. Um, Most of these lithium type batteries are transported as class 9 dangerous goods. And over the years, the portable types have been given some flexibility in the transportation, and they're still regulated, but the term I like to use is, in a lot of cases, they're called class 9 light. That's my term, not an official term. So they still have requirements, but they're not as full as the outright class 9 requirements to some extent. When you get into the medium format types, they pass the thresholds for those relaxation of regulations. So there's definitely a difference between the portable and the medium formats in that area. So there was a recognition of that, and that needs to be accounted for in any type of collection and recycling campaign. There was a lot of reference to the potential for federal legislation. Um, that is something that's been discussed in the battery industry for a long time. There is a federal battery law dating back to the mid 1990s called the Mercury Containing and Rechargeable Battery Management Act. But that law looks only at mercury batteries, and then on the rechargeable side, it covers the nickel cadmium and nickel metal hydride batteries, which are still used today, but they're not nearly as common as they once were with the onset of lithium ion and other technologies. So if we were to do federal legislation, it would need to capture more chemistries. And there's been a struggle to some extent. The federal government has expressed interest in some cases in this, but they usually come back and say, yeah, there's interest, but we have other higher priorities. So federal has not been something that has gained a lot of traction, even though it is being discussed. The other thing is, when this group was started to look at the labeling requirements for collection and recycling, it really is intended for developing voluntary, uh, I'll call them requirements. They wouldn't be requirements if they're voluntary, but voluntary guidelines. But I do feel more and more that the mood is starting to feel less voluntary in this case. And it's not because anybody's pushing a particular agenda or anything. In some cases people are, but it's not really why the mood's changing. A lot of it really has to do with the state legislation. because right now, as I sit here today, there are 20 states that are involved in collection and recycling legislation, and I have a chart to show that here momentarily. And then there are 4 places that already have laws that are on the books that cover uh, portable and medium format batteries, and those are Washington State, Vermont, Illinois, and the District of Columbia. The district is the only one that is active and running, but the other 3 states I mentioned will be coming live for all battery types starting next year. And I forgot California, which starts this year. Um, and then there was also regarding where EPA goes coming out of the medium format session and into the large format session with the administrative change at the presidential level. There was a lot of uncertainty, which still remains today. So it was interesting that EPA apparently did get the go-ahead to do the large format meetings. So I have not had a conversation with EPA since I saw that note come out. Trying to schedule something with them just to kind of pick their brains on, what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. But usually the response I get from other government groups that I have spoken with in the last week is they're like, well, you know as much as we do if you read the news. So until something's in the news, usually even the government agencies don't know what's going on exactly. So there is some uncertainty right now, and I think that will obviously start to become more certain as we go forward in the coming months. So the last slide I have, as I've mentioned here, this slide is, it seems like it changes daily. It has slowed down a little bit as we've gotten into the legislative sessions in many of the different states. So I'll go through the key on this. So, and I'll start with, as I mentioned, the states that are in red. Well, and before I start too, this chart covers all the different sizes: portable, medium format, and large format batteries, and that's what the different color codes mean. And some of the states are looking at both, and I'll get into that here. So the red states are those that have enacted portable and medium format legislation as laws. So that's California, Washington, Illinois, Vermont, and the District of Columbia. As I mentioned, the district is the only entity right now they've been collecting since 2023. And then the other ones, California is supposed to go into effect. Well, technically it was supposed to go into effect next month, but they haven't finished the rulemaking. So there's a little bit of a delay there. And then Washington, Illinois, and Vermont will go into effect in 2026 or 27. So that's for portable and medium format enacted laws. The yellow represents those states that are looking right now at and have either active legislation that has been introduced or they have draft legislation that could be introduced behind the scenes that we've seen. And those are all the states that are in yellow. Where we are today, if I had to say where potentially legislation could be enacted into law, you never know with these states, but the states that are inching closer and closer to something are Oregon, Nebraska, Colorado, and Connecticut right now are the ones that I would say have a decent, if not better, chance of being enacted this year. We'll see how those go. The other states are either much more uncertain or they haven't introduced anything, or like in the case of Massachusetts, we think Massachusetts has a very good chance of passing, but they have a 2-year legislative cycle, and they've already said they're going to do the homework this year, and they expect that to ramp up in 2026. So we'll see what the other states do. Many of you are probably aware of the Minnesota discussion. So all these other states, I'm looking just to make sure I'm not missing one that is doing it more at an omnibus style. Um, so all the other states except for, well, Maryland and Minnesota are looking at where they join batteries, electronic devices, and even packaging in some cases together in a larger bill. Um, I don't think Maryland will go anywhere this year with that. I expect Maryland will be very active next year. Um, Minnesota does have an omnibus bill, but there's a lot of chaos right now in Minnesota in the legislature itself, notwithstanding the chaotic nature of the omnibus type bill. So I don't know what's going to happen in Minnesota. We'll see. But I certainly don't feel that Minnesota is as far along, maybe as like the other ones I mentioned, like Oregon, Colorado, Nebraska, etc. So then moving over to the green represents states that are looking at the same type of collection and recycling activities, but they're focusing on large format, specifically electric vehicle batteries. So that's going to be Washington State, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, New York just introduced something, and Massachusetts has something as well. Um, where those will go is I think anybody's guess at this particular time. Um, Washington State has been extremely active in this area. There have probably been, not exaggerating, not outside even the hearings, a dozen stakeholder meetings on the bill in Washington. So we'll see where that goes. We're inching closer and closer. I think that may have a better chance than maybe some of the other states. And then California will be interesting because their EV law actually was passed last year by the Assembly and the Senate, but it was vetoed by the governor because it did not have a stewardship organization in it. So that bill has been reintroduced, and oddly enough, it still does not have a stewardship organization in it. So we'll see where that goes. We expect that will certainly pass the legislature, so we'll see what the governor does in that case. New Mexico and Colorado, I think, are still a little bit earlier, so I don't know where they'll go. Same with New York, and then Massachusetts would probably be the same as the portable and medium format, where it'll go into 2026. And then lastly, the blue is the one state out there that has already passed a electric vehicle EPR bill for the batteries in them. So that will go into effect in 2027. So with that, I will stop
Mark,
and
thank you so
welcome any
much.
questions.
We really enjoy our relationship with the Rechargeable Battery Association and your work here to show us this content. I will say that Call to Recycle is a great partner of the NBDA People for Bikes. They've done tremendous effort in the bicycle industry to set up a recycling program for bicycle retailers and for suppliers. So Call to Recycle will be at the NBDA Retailer Summit Central presenting their information. And we have information at the NBDA linked off our website too. So any attendee who's listening, please look to Call to Recycle. That's a great option. And then potentially, Mark, as you said, a great question is how do we get broader participation in recycling? I think for a future foruming, we potentially have that as a topic we could discuss. I think we did maybe a year ago, but it would be great to bring that back up. Now that the EPA is really looking at this, I think we need to, take some measures forward. Let's stop the share screen on your side, Mark, and we'll open it up to some questions if any panel members have on this discussion. Any panel members?
There we go. Sorry,
Oh,
I had to
Dawn.
find it again.
No, it's perfect. Dawn, I see your hand up. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Um, I was kind of wondering if, there are any products that consumers recycle at decently high rates that they can't just put out in front of their home. Um, you know, it, I think it's a very laudable goal, but I'm just wondering are there precedents? Are there, and if so, what made those work? We've heard people talk about having a deposit. Is that something that was discussed at the meeting in that kind of motivation section?
It's a great question.
So, yeah, I'll take that in parts. So, ironically, the single best example of a collection and recycling program on the planet is lead acid batteries. So think of which are your car battery, not if you have an EV, but so your lead acid starter battery in there. There are some years when those batteries exceed 100% of what's placed on the market, mainly because of just how long they get held onto. But generally speaking, those are always in the in the high 90% collection and recycling rate because they do have their deposit, they're heavy, consumers don't always interact with them. So there is a very that's a great example, but it's also a unique example in a lot of cases because the consumer doesn't interact with them in many cases.
Mhm.
Obviously, there are other things like carpets and paint and other items that are collected and recycled, but those are also more less, sorry, I should say less unique than a lead acid battery, because the consumer can carry those, they can empty them out, they can technically hide them in their garbage or something like that. So that is one of the things that we struggle with. It was talked about. Deposits are always discussed in any type of EPR forum. They tend not to go in that direction because there are other reasons why deposits are not desirable, and that whether a deposit is desirable depends on who you are or what entity you represent or entities you represent. So it tends not to go in that direction. Now, I will say the European Union has been collecting batteries in some member states since the mid 90s, but collectively as Europe since 2006. Those countries in Europe vary on their collection rates, but they vary, anywhere from the 20-some% rate all the way up to in the 50s, 60% rates for countries like Switzerland and Austria or places like that. Um, so there are examples of even portable batteries that have high collection rates, but again, it's a mixed bag even in places that have had the legislation on the books for a long time.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. Great question, Dawn. Thank you for that. I see one more question, Mark, from April from Outside Advice. April, thanks for being here.
Yeah, Mark, thanks so much for the presentation. One question that I had was, what is the labeling format? I guess that's being discussed. How do they expect to put that? Yeah, collect and track all of this.
So what we've included in the model legislation, and again, what's active in Europe to some extent. So one of the big ones is well, the first part is the chemistry. The recyclers really need to know what the chemistry of the battery is, because a couple things can happen. The chemistry of the battery, one chemistry can be a poison to the process of another chemistry for recycling, so it can poison the output.
Sorry, I meant like the actual physical label.
Oh, okay.
Not what it's inside, but like the actual, is it a sticker? Is it a QR code? Is it a
Oh,
series of labels? Is it a barcode? What? Yeah, sorry.
it's more, well, the chemistry is just usually a name or a symbol, and you'll have like a 3 chasing arrows or the wheelie bin and usually that has to be on there indelibly. So it would either be an indelible sticker or in a lot of cases etched or painted on there. There are some provisions that exempt the very small types, because even if you put it on there, you couldn't read it anyway. But generally speaking, the label is something it's printed or stickered onto the label in an indelible fashion.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Mark, really appreciate your presentation. Lots of great content and, appreciate just being here. You're volunteering your time. Panel members, I'm now going to move over to topic 2, which is the role of the specialty bicycle retailer in promoting e-bike safety and education. We know that the specialty bicycle retailers are often the first point of contact for many e-bike buyers. And we want to make sure that specialty bicycle retailers go beyond basic education. So making sure riders understand legal requirements, safety challenges, proper riding etiquette, while building up this, promotion of getting on your bike, use it, go out and be safe, don't worry. So we have 3 speakers from the panel who will speak to this. A great conversation for retailers in attendance to pay attention to. And please, again, place any questions into chat. At first, I'd like to welcome Clint Sandusky, bike patrol instructor, cycling and traffic expert, and educator. Clint, thanks for being here.
Heather, and hello, everyone. Please give me a moment to share my screen. All right, so my focus is going to be on what's in it for me, meaning you, the retailers, and also the wonderful resources, educational resources that are out there. Most of my presentation is going to come from an article I wrote for a bicycle retailer, and I still do believe that retailers are the first line of defense in e-bike safety. We've all seen an increasing amount of electric bicycle enforcement and restrictions across the country due to conflicts, complaints, and incidents. More and more stories are emerging of unsafe, illegal, and irresponsible e-bike use, including our teens. More legislators across the country are enacting or authoring bills addressing these, what I call the bad and the ugly of e-bike use. I'll use California as an example. In this session, half the bills you see there that are bicycle related relate to bicycles. Of course, they had many last year, including 2 pilot programs where they put in age restrictions in 2 counties. And unfortunately, we've seen this as well. Here's one example up in Northern California where a pedestrian was struck by a person riding an e-bike on a path, and unfortunately that pedestrian died. Here's another story out of the Boston area. A 70-year-old cyclist riding an e-bike was riding in the bike lane and was doored. Unfortunately, I guess they probably didn't know that if you ride what we call in the door zone bike lane, if you don't stay at least 5 feet away, you stand a chance of getting doored. And unfortunately, a lot of times that leads to severe injury or death. So education is key. So what can you do as your part? But I'd first like to say, you're not in this alone, nor do I think you have to be experts in bicycle education. So as an example, we're all in this together. And here's a list of various stakeholders out there, including parents. Keep doing the basics, the things you do every day in educating your customers, including but not limiting to, from basic e-bike operations and battery safety, which is a huge one, to reading your owner's manual. I know it's not sexy, but very important. I would like to encourage all of you to go beyond the basics for exceptional customer service. So what's in it for me? Number 1, credibility. Show your customers you know what you're talking about. And that's from talking about the ins and outs about the e-bike and how it's operated, what classes of e-bikes you sell, the definitions of an e-bike. If you know of whether it's locally or statewide, some of the user equipment and access requirements for your state, that'd be great. You probably all know People for Bikes has that wonderful electric bicycle law guides for every state. Customer confidence. I say if you're transparent about the bikes you sell, people will trust you with their current purchase and in the future. Now, here's a key one: customer care. Showing your customers you care about their well-being. We all want the customers to be safe and happy in return. So going beyond either providing them or directing them to all the effective and wonderful resources out there to be successful on their e-bikes is great. Because the bottom line is alive or uninjured cyclists make better customers. Customer loyalty. Hey, if they're satisfied with their purchase, they're going to return and buy more. That's a good thing. And finally, we're all in this together to help curb the increasing and restricting from local and statewide e-bike laws. Of course, like I mentioned before, due to the bad and ugly behavior by e-bike users. Unfortunately, if these laws keep happening, I can foresee a reduction in e-bike purchase and or use. So we're all in this together. Talking about education, there's 2 nationally recognized educational programs out there, and I'll do it alphabetically. First, the Cycling Savvy program. They have in-person and online courses, including a wealth of e-bike safety resources. They have 2 e-bike online courses, one specifically for teens. I think that's excellent. And then also one for adults. Cycling Savvy also has a wonderful e-bike rider's guide to safety and etiquette. You can download it, print it out, and provide it to all your customers who purchase e-bikes. It's a great guide. Also, if you've heard of John Allen and his Bicycling Street Smarts, been doing it for 20 plus years. He's got a Cycling Savvy edition with a new e-bike chapter. And if you buy these books in bulk, they're very inexpensive. Hey, pass them out to your customers, whether conventional or e-bike wise. Of course, the league for years has had their smart cycling program. And of course, they have online videos and in-person courses. With People for Bikes, they created their e-bike smart video course. Unfortunately, with this course, unlike Cycling Savvy, once you complete the course, you can't print out a certificate, which could be good for like a diversion program if you get a citation. Talking about trail etiquette, we all know about IMBA and their Ride Vibes. I found this a few years back from Tread Lightly, an e-bike specific tips, very excellent. And also, this is the latest thing out there, and this is targeting parents, because I think parents are the first line of defense when their teen says, "Hey, mommy, I'd like to get an e-bike because all my friends have e-bikes." So this is an excellent book for that. And there's actually a chapter on teen rider conduct, which addresses the psychological aspects that teens go through with the e-bikes and everything else in life. So my final thoughts, as a retailer, you have a wonderful opportunity to be an initial influencer and educator for your customers by providing them and/or directing them to the resources they need to be successful, confident, and have fun riding their e-bikes. And I do encourage all retailers, distributors, and manufacturers to share the previous mentioned resources on your website so they're available for everybody. So I'd like to thank you. Feel free to contact me at my email address if you have any questions. I hope to see you at Cab to West. That's going to be exciting there in Vegas. We're back in Vegas. And I hand it over to, I guess, Michael.
Well, thank you so much, Clint. What fabulous resources. I did my best to put all the links into chat for our attendees as you went through as well. And Clint, we are extremely thrilled to see you in Vegas and have you present there as well. You always bring the energy. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you, Heather.
It's good energy. It's contagious. Let's pass it over to Michael Pasquale, founder of Micromobility Connect, to hear his thoughts on how the specialty bicycle retailer can promote safe cycling and safe e-bike use. Michael?
Hi, Heather, and thanks to everybody for coming today. I have a different perspective. Clint, that was absolutely amazing. Provided a lot of resources, a lot of crossover from what I'm going to talk about. And being an e-bike shop for 15 years, we had a lot of challenges in educating the consumer as well, right? Initially, it was, do you need a license and insurance? That was the major questions that we were getting years ago. Now, we don't get asked that anymore. And I'm sure William from Scooteretti can attest back then how it was. But we have a unique opportunity as an independent dealer to educate those consumers. And sometimes we're not the first stop. Sometimes they went to a bicycle shop or they went to another e-bike shop. And they might have said, oh, we don't service those, but they failed to take that opportunity to educate the consumer. So we love the customers that are thirsty for knowledge and come in to ask questions, and we love the opportunity to educate our customers as well. There is, when they're purchasing a bike from us, a lot of information overload, right? It's their first e-bike. In some instances, we print out the rules and regulations, so we want to give them a copy, and we have a printout at the store so we can read it to them while they're asking all the questions. And also lithium batteries, all the information for safety storing, handling, and charging lithium batteries. But it is a lot of information to a consumer to take in all at once, especially, and then learning how to ride their e-bike on top of that. So it's definitely a lot to absorb, and I like the customers. We do our best to educate them and provide them all the resources that they need. And we encourage them to reach out at any time if they have any questions. We want them leaving confident that they know how to ride their e-bike, confident that they know the rules of the road, and confident that they know everything there is to know around the safety part of their lithium battery. And Clint, you covered a lot of stuff and a lot of resources. That was absolutely amazing. So always have what I can suggest to retailers is have a printed copy of the regulations. It's critical as a retailer that you explain where you can ride and provide a copy of those rules and regulations. So when they get home, they can have the time to read it. You want to go through it at your shop. Another thing under the legal requirements too, where I am, we have 444 municipalities. So you have your city, and then you have the surrounding area, and then you have all these municipalities, and the rules can be different from each municipality, from city to city, and there's a lot of fragmentation. So explaining thoroughly to consumers where they can and cannot ride is very important, because you may be able to ride on a beach trail in one municipality, but not the next one, or one city and then not the next city. The regulations change. So there's a lot of patchwork in the regulations. It's like a moving target. And as a retailer, you want to keep up with that, so you're providing the correct information to consumers. As far as safety, e-bikes are faster and heavier than traditional bikes. Proper etiquette is the key for safety. We don't want anybody to get hit by an e-bike or injured while they're riding their e-bike. Respect and coexisting with other road and trail users is important, whether you're riding an e-bike or a bicycle. You ring your bell, you let people know they're coming. You don't whiz by somebody and kind of spook them, right? Saturday that just passed, I was at the Toronto Bike Show, and they have a test track there. Well, they added Bike and e-bike expo now, because a lot of the shows are dominated by e-bikes. And I was watching people go around the test track, and there was an elderly gentleman just going at his own pace and pedaling, and there was people that had to literally slam their brakes. And I was watching this happen time after time, and just from the corner of my eye, I heard brake slam, as well as a gentleman had a wipeout on one of the e-bikes, and it wasn't pretty. He was leaking a little bit of fluid, and it wasn't pretty. So safety, definitely. I don't know if it was his first time on an e-bike, but safety training should be, and teaching people how to ride an e-bike properly should be on the high list of things to teach people when they're purchasing their bike, or they've purchased a bike online direct to consumer. Battery safety training, teach customers safe charging, storage, and fire prevention, and show them how to take their battery on and off and where to charge it. Don't just give them pamphlets. Go over the best practices, and I staple the best practices for lithium batteries to their invoice, so they don't lose it with a pile of paper. They're always going to keep their invoice, and I make sure I tell them, read those best practices. You should always refer to your manufacturer's manual, but some people that buy secondhand or used bikes, they don't have a manual. So that's a good baseline to go by. A lot of e-bike riders don't know the safety rules. Many are new to cycling or transitioning from cars. E-bikes do handle much differently than traditional bikes, and we need to educate consumers on that. And it doesn't matter where you're located, whether you're in Canada, US, any state or province. Whenever there's an injury or a death, unfortunately, or anything happening with e-bikes or lithium batteries, it usually makes national news. So we're all part of this as independent bike dealers. We all need to work together to really educate the consumers. So when you're on multi-use paths, that's where a lot of the injuries happen, where there's kids and dogs and elderly walking. Pedestrians have the right of way. Slow down and call out when passing other riders or joggers or trail users. Obey the posted speed limits. You don't want to go 20 miles an hour or 32 kilometers an hour on a multi-use trail. Slow down. Your reaction time will be a lot less. Common courtesy, again, don't just whiz by people, ring the bell. And you don't want to, when you're riding, you don't want to ride close to parked cars. You never want to get that door prize. It's never a good thing. Fostering customer loyalty and promoting safer e-bike use. So customers who feel supported are more likely to buy accessories, return for service, and recommend your shop. So you have opportunities every single day in your shop to educate people. One of the questions I like to ask is, where did you purchase your bike? And how do you like it? And what do you love about it? So that gets a dialogue going with people. And then they really open up and tell you, oh, I bought it here, I bought it there, I'm happy or I'm not happy. And that presents a great opportunity for retailers to start on the education pieces, maybe hand them a printout, explain a little bit about the e-bikes to them. So independent bike dealers that prioritize safety and education, they're going to stand out, right? Consumers are going to want to come back because you genuinely care about their safety and their usage of their e-bike. more education equals fewer accidents, equals more confident riders, equals more referrals and repeat business, and overall a better view of the e-bike industry. Thank you. Clint, you're going to be hard to beat, so.
No, thank you so much, Michael. I like to hear the differing opinions. That's why we do it this way, so we can all hear what everyone has to share. And I did place a link to the Human Powered Solutions prepared safe battery use and storage protocols as well into the chat. So fantastic information. I'm sure we're all continuing to think about what's been shared so far. We have one more presenter, Luke Elrath, bicycle and bicycling technical consultant, who's been on the panel for some time. Luke, great to have you back.
Well, thank you, Heather, and the NBDA team for the opportunity. I appreciate the work you do to put this together. I will be presenting some of the same recommendations that Clint and Michael spoke about, but I'm coming from a different perspective. I'm a bicycle expert witness. I am retained by attorneys when there's a civil suit that related to somebody who got hurt using a bicycle or an e-bike. And so a lot of my perspective comes from risk mitigation on terms of the shop. Attorneys on the plaintiff side or the defense side can retain me to look into, did everything happen at the time of purchase to set up the e-bike rider for the most safe experience? And even before e-bikes, I was a bicycle product manager, first at Fuji and then at Trek. I designed e-bikes for Breezer way back in 2008. But regardless of the type of bike, what we always talked to our authorized dealers about was the critical nature of the conversation that you have at the time of sale. Like Michael said, you're asking this person, what bike do you have now? What do you like about it? What you don't? What are you interested in getting? And how do you envision you're going to use it? And quite specifically, these answers are going to allow it'll inform you about what you might need to warn or instruct or educate the buyer about for this new product. The biggest one for me that I see quite often is just simply the strength of front hydraulic disc brakes and the risk for pitchover. And I've been in cases in which it's almost universal that the assumption on the part of the person that it happens to and the attorney that they retain is that these brakes locked up. They are defective. And the first challenge that I have is to educate those two parties to say, these brakes are strong because the bikes can go faster and are heavier, and this is the state of the art in bicycle brake technology. With that comes a need to specifically say, your front brake is on the left, you got to take it easy and understand how it reacts to your inputs before you go out on the road. So that's the second thing, is really to talk about how are you going to use this? Some people only will ever take this on a mixed use path, have no interest in sharing the roads in traffic with cars. For those people, you're going to give them possibly different information than somebody who says, I already commute to work on a bicycle. I want an e-bike to make it a little easier or do it in different weather. And that will tell you about, hey, you obviously have a driver's license. You already understand the rules of the road. You're going to use this e-bike very similar to the way that you drive with a couple modifications. You go slower, go farther to the right, but always travel in the direction of traffic, always obey signs and speed limits and lights and all the other things that motorists do. Because for me, the underlying concept for safe cycling is predictability. If you follow the same set of rules that everybody else on the road does, you are going to be safer and more predictable to the other road users. This conversation that you're having at the time of sale gives you an opportunity to talk about safe cycling and hand out pamphlets or direct people to the resources we've been talking about. In preparation for this talk, I looked up some of the ones that I really like. And the first one, the NBDA put out a one-page battery safety best practices document. And looking at that with my eyes on the cases that I have investigated, I love a couple of things about it. One, it's brief, it's a page. Often people are intimidated and people say, I never read the owner's manual. It's 60 pages long and I know how to ride a bike. Okay, that is fair. But there is information that is critical On the battery safety best practices document, there are 3 statements that are all caps. Never charge a battery unattended. Do not attempt to charge a battery if it's been damaged or wet. Do not attempt to have your original battery refurbished. And sorry, there's a 4th. Don't replace your battery pack from a third-party manufacturer. And I like the fact that the information is presented in a way that everybody understands. Things that are the most potentially hazardous are in all caps. If you're just going to skim this thing, hit those first because those are critical. But I can't imagine a downside to handing this out at the time of purchase, because from my perspective, what happens is when a plaintiff's attorney from a person who's hurt on a bike and wants to sue the shop, they ask me, what questions can we ask the shop to establish that they didn't meet their standard of care to make sure that the client, the purchaser of the bike, has all the information they need to operate it safely. And so if you can say as a retailer, every bike that we sell comes with these documents, you've already mitigated your risk. You have presented the information that if the unfortunate circumstance where you're being sued comes up, you can simply say, here's the paper we give out. They had the information, we gave it to them, and if they did not read it, heed it, it's on them. The second document I was looking at, I haven't purchased it yet, but the Electric Bicycle Owner's Manual that People for Bikes has been talking about and putting together. I only have the watermarked 11-page introduction, but the topics that are in there are critical, and that's a really valuable one that I have been noticing a deficiency in my investigations lately. Direct from consumer e-bikes do not have sufficient information in the owner's manuals to use them safely. So here's my #1 recommendation to every e-bike dealer. Whatever brands you choose to sell, sit down and read cover to cover the owner's manual that comes with them. And with your own experience, education, and training, make a determination if that owner's manual is sufficient for a user, a first-time purchaser of an e-bike, to get all the information they need to use it safely. And if not, this is a wonderful supplement that allows you to say, we gave them everything, and like Clint said, and like Michael said, simply tell them, read the owner's manual. It might be something where people just take for granted that, yeah, you have to include it as part of the rules, but nobody does it. I think if you're a dealer, an expert in e-bikes, and you're telling a purchaser, this is important, at the very least, you've met your responsibilities to hand out the information. And the third one that I have comes from People for Bikes, and that is the trail etiquette guidelines for e-bikes. And in addition to the other resources that have been mentioned so far, based on your region, if you do sell electric mountain bikes, this is a great thing to hand out or to point to people to say, hey, if you've never been on trails before with an e-bike, this is a good way to at least understand what to expect and how you should be operating your vehicle. Again, this is a lot of information to impart at the time of sale. I understand that from a dealer's perspective, but you all know your business well enough to distill these concepts into the most important things to talk about, but having an informed conversation in which you ask questions to understand my next topic, which is, what are your riding aspirations with this e-bike? Where are you going to ride it? In traffic, off-road? And those responses that they give you will either tell you, #1, they have no idea what they want to do, and you might be able to just give them guidance. But if they tell you specific uses, you can ask another question. Well, do you understand that you can ride here and you can't ride there? Do you know about speed limits? Do you know about e-bike classifications? And give them an opportunity to ask you questions. But I can tell you, I've been in cases in which a shop's being sued, and when asked, what kind of conversation do you have at the time of an e-bike sale? They said in no uncertain terms, we say, if you have any questions, let us know, and we send them out the door. And it's my opinion that that's not sufficient. You need to elicit some information from your customer and volunteer some guidance. If they don't want to hear it, no problem. But in the unfortunate circumstance that something bad happens, you can say definitively, that we went through the steps that a reasonable e-bike dealer would do to make sure that their buyers are safe. And then sort of the last one in that conversation, and one that you wouldn't be doing if you're selling regular bicycles, is where will this e-bike be stored? Asking the person about whether they have understanding of the limitations, the safety considerations of how you use it and where it's stored. I just jotted down here the charging best practices of e-bikes. And you can find some of that in the resources that have been mentioned so far. The concerns with corrosion and moisture getting into battery and the electric components of the e-bikes. So they need to think about where it's going to be and not just locked up outside 24/7. And obviously, the biggest part of this is the discussion about fire hazards and safety. You can talk to them about the 3 or 4 critical concepts on the battery safety best practices. Don't charge it unattended. Don't charge a damaged or wet battery. And those sort of things where we all have electronic devices. I understand that there is an assumption among most people who own cell phones and laptop computers that when I'm not using it, it's plugged in so that when it's time to use, I unplug it and I always know it's fully charged. I know that it's been a multi-year effort to allow people to understand that in these cases, that's not the best practice. If you're going to store it for a long time, I like how it says leave it at about 60% charge. That gives people an understanding of what they're looking for, and all the batteries that we sell on e-bikes have a little charge indicator somewhere. For people to understand that this thing is a liability when it's plugged in, that will hopefully shape their understanding and their plans on how they're going to use it, how they're going to charge it, how they're going to store it. But to kind of just wrap up what I'm talking about, it's the conversation that is the standard of care on the bike shop. Looking forward to covering your liability. Say the things that you want to be able to answer in court that says, yep, we provided that information. Whether they followed it or not, we gave them all the tools they need to use this thing safely. And if they ask for more information, we were open and receptive to continuing the education process on our website, on sending links and sharing resources, or doing whatever it is that the customer needs to use the product. So that's pretty much everything I had. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Luke, thank you. Such great insight there. I think that, that just showing that you're open and receptive and you're guiding the rider, not just at the time of purchase, but in the future is so important. We have a couple questions. We'll keep them short because we do have one more topic today. William, I see your hand up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great presentation by the 3 presenters, so thank you for that. Question directly over to Luke. Last conversation we had, probably a couple of presentations before, you mentioned about handing these documents out to customers, but having some sort of proof that you gave it to them. So it took your information to heart, thought about it, and we actually got some legal counsel advice here in Canada. And one of the best methods for us is to no longer hand out paper, but rather we have a profile of all of our customers by email, and we send them, in our case, we sell a lot of Bosch bikes. So we link over to the Bosch YouTube channel, which has amazing videos on how to use the product, as well as their battery guide for their products. And we link it over to, put it in the link in the email. It's the default template we have. And then we send that through to the customers in order to get that confirmation by email, so that we have something written. Because the old story, if it wasn't written, it didn't happen. That seemed to be one of the things that council brought up to us, rather than just handing it out. Because there is an aspect of, oops, maybe we didn't give it to them. Are you 100% prove that you gave it to them, right? So without, video footage, a recording, a signature on the document, which brings these elements of human error, we decided to do most of it by email. So just wanted to get your advice on that and your thoughts on if that you agree with that statement from legal.
I certainly do. I mean, if you're generating this digital record of having sent that to them, you've done your responsibility to the part of it. It's similar to the fact that I'm frequently in cases in which the person who is hurt on the e-bike says, well, I simply didn't know. And one of the points of my investigation is, well, what is this information and how long does it take for me to access it? And I'll go on Google and I'll type a very basic search, and it might just be make and model of the e-bike that they were on, and owner's manual.pdf, and you can pull it up right away. So a lot of people say I didn't get the owner's manual or it wasn't given at the time of sale. Every single bike and e-bike in the United States, with a couple of exceptions, has a really easy way to find the PDF owner's manual online. And similarly, any safety topic, if you want to understand about traffic safety, I'll say, well, the plaintiff claimed that they didn't understand this concept of traffic safety. And I'll say, well, I got a $9.95 book that outlines it that you can buy on Amazon. I did a Google search and I found a pamphlet about safe riding practices. These sort of things, digitally or printed, I think are both good ways to get them out.
Excellent. Thank you, Luke. Yeah. Clint.
There you go. Kind of expanding upon what this discussion's been on and providing customers, whether in person or digitally, information. I just wanted to mention for everybody out there, because it may end up affecting them in some way. So one of the California bills, it's AB 968, is proposing a notice put into all e-bike packaging that would require manufacturers and distributors of e-bikes to include this notice that informs parents, especially, of minor riders of the risks and responsibilities associated with riding an e-bike. Of course, it's the devil's in the details. And my organization, CABO, I'm sure CalBike, People for Bikes, is going to be involved. So I see this as a positive thing, at least if it's done well with bullet point and quick, like we've been talking about content. So I'll include that in the link so everybody has that bill. But as California goes, the rest of the country goes. So be looking out for that bill.
Thank you, Clint. And I just added it into the chat as well for everyone. Perfect. Let's keep moving here. Thank you so much for everyone's expertise. I really am so thankful. Our third topic is on e-bike safety and the future of battery transparency. Talking about the EU battery regulations and how that will impact US retailers and riders. The question to the panel is, with the upcoming EU battery regulation and the introduction of the battery passport, what potential impact could this have on US e-bike retailers and riders? How might it influence the brands they carry? And will US riders care about transparency and sustainability features that the EU brands may leverage, even if not mandated here in the US? So I'm thankful to have April Marsh, a friend of mine, Outside Advice. She's a consultant and she's here to speak on the topic. April, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. And I didn't originally think that I was going to be like a battery nerd at some point in my life, but I became one hardcore. I am American, but I have been living in Europe over the past 11 years. And so I've seen the e-bike journey and its growth more from a European perspective than an American perspective. And today's conversation has been enlightening to me. So thank you for having me and all of the presenters. So as Heather mentioned, I'm going to be speaking today on it's called the battery regulation. It's a really big thing. You can Google it. It's part of several other regulations. So I like to think of the European regulation system as like Russian nesting dolls. It's like it starts with one big package and then it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and you find more and more. And what we're going to talk about today is Article 13 of the battery regulation, and it specifically calls out a battery passport. Now, you might be asking, what do you mean by a passport? It's not a physical thing. But first, let's start with why. So the battery regulation is part of a larger European idea around a digital twin transition. And what that means is they want Europe in general to be more digitalized. They want to shift from a linear economy to a circular economy. They want to provide transparency to impact decision makers throughout the value chain of batteries. And then they want to create what they call a battery level playing field, where there's value creation, value capture, and value conservation throughout again, throughout the value chain. And it always starts as like sounding very much like a sustainability thing. Like, oh, this is where our sustainability manager is gonna manage this for us. But it's actually very geopolitical. The European Union wants to keep these precious metals and raw materials in the European Union. And I think it was Mark earlier talked a little bit about what they call battery leakage. How many batteries are getting imported into the European Union or made in the European Union, and how many are staying in, how many are getting recycled within the EU. And even though it might seem like they have really high rates of that, there's also a lot of batteries that get shipped to other countries. And that's not okay for the European Union. One, because they lose the minerals and they lose all the resources, and it's more or less illegal for companies to be doing that. But there are also the human rights violations that go on in the places where these batteries are being taken apart is also not okay. And so there's a lot of supply chain due diligence that's also built into this entire package. So it goes from, hey, we want to keep our own raw materials, we want to be more self-reliant, and we want to create a more sustainable economy. So what this actually is, the physical thing that's being created is a QR code. And the batteries that are affected are electric vehicle batteries, LMT batteries, which are light means of transportation batteries. And that's where e-bike batteries, scooter batteries, they kind of fit under that. I think you might call them the medium or medium portable ones. And then anything over 2 kilowatt hours. That's where these are the main batteries that they're targeting first and foremost. And those might be something that might be used in a power tool or something like that. And so this little passport, it is 97 magical data fields that brands have to figure out how to get all of this information into one interoperable data source. Interoperable because lots of different people need to be able to have access to it at some point. The European Union is creating an authentication system where, depending on where you're authenticated and where your access rights are, you may or may not be able to see certain parts of what's in the passport. And what's contained is very interesting. One, a carbon footprint. There will be a carbon footprint label. And that's pretty great because it means standardization of metrics around talking about carbon footprint for batteries. So if you can imagine right now, we have some batteries say one carbon footprint, others might say another, depends on which company they use to do their carbon footprint. So what the European Union is saying, no, we want to stop greenwashing. Everyone's going to follow the same metrics. This is how you calculate carbon footprint, and that data goes into the passport for riders to be able to see or consumers to be able to see. Then there's materials and composition. Some of that will be more private information and some of it will be public. It also comes along with recycled content. So how much of your battery is coming from recycled content? That's another great thing that people want to know, because along with all of this, they're hoping that having this QR code will also boost the recycling industry by some of the things that were talked about in Mark's presentation. Yeah, higher collection rates, you have a more steady stream of supply, and along in here, you'll see that there's also symbols, labels, certificates of conformity, identifiers, product data. All of this helps recyclers sort. It helps them disassemble the battery in a safe and effective way quickly. And so they also don't need to go and find out, oh, can these materials mix with these materials? Where did it come from? All of that information is presented to them even before they buy those batteries to make sure that that's actually something that they want to bring into their recycling footprint. One that will be very interesting in the future is performance and durability. So the regulation rolls out in a couple different, I would say like every 2 years, it's like a new fun thing that gets added to the regulation. But for consumers, it's fantastic. So performance and durability, there will be a battery performance metric. You will have a grade. It's almost like, on the side of consumer electronics, it's like the ABCD rating of like how efficient it is. It's similar to that idea. And again, it's a standardized, harmonized metric system that comes from the European Commission and is imposed on producers. to then measure, report out on, and then it's validated and audited by a third party to make sure that it's all truthful. And then you can actually compare. So when I talk about this, and I get really, you can kind of tell like I'm pretty pumped on the battery passport, but the value that it drives is transparency. So one, it's driving accountability to manufacturers, which is really important. We don't want batteries that are of low quality, low performance being put into bicycles without consumers knowing. They just think that that expensive e-bikes are just more expensive because people are making a lot more money on all of these expensive e-bikes, but that's not true. The materials of the battery are actually better and the supply chain is healthier. And so when you take these things into consideration, pricing makes more sense. And you were talking about, Michael and Clint, you were both talking about, how can we have our riders be more empowered, understand their product better, have that better relationship with it. Part of that is really teaching them what's inside it and how it can be dangerous, but not from a fear-mongering perspective, but more from a ownership perspective and empowerment perspective. Also easier servicing, repair, refurbish, spare parts, all of that's going to be in there. And I know that refurbishment is also a very delicate item in conversation when we talk about batteries, and it's not yet something that is clear in the regulation. There are technical parts of the regulation where they have asked for single cell replaceability in a battery, which is very unstable and not really safe at all. And yet it's something that engineering teams, I'm sure Bosch is understanding this and heard about this from his counterparts in Europe, but they're working diligently on how does this even work? Can this even be done? So there's a lot of information in there for people that are potentially creating new markets around batteries that maybe don't exist yet. There's a massive amount of cooperation that's required to get this done well. So it is sparking's not the right word here, developing closer relationships between suppliers and customers. So there's conversations that I've been really surprised that some of our manufacturers or some of the companies I've been consulting with, they haven't yet had certain conversations with their suppliers around some of the data that's in the passport, which has been surprising to me. So there will be even more of an open approach of how are we talking about, or how are we working together with this very important technology. So then there's the environmental, social, governance measures, the ESG. Again, there's a whole package that will be outlined, have a common set. In Europe, I'm also looking at, there's an ISO 5940, I think it is, that's come out that has a circular data sheets. And we could actually create one for the bike industry, and it would be voluntary, but we could actually implement that also into our own passport as an industry. So it's pretty cool because as an industry, we get to decide, yes, there's these 97 things that the commission say we have to have in the passport, but what might some other interesting things be that we want included in the passport as an industry? And some of that might be, some of that information that Clint and Michael were talking about around how to ride a bike properly, how to be safe on the bike, proper usage. The other piece, we talked a little bit about collection rates of recycling. End of life management is part of the passport. So because every individual battery will have a QR code, as it gets attached to a bike and sold, that's great. It's also going to be contacted or continually giving dynamic data every time it's connected to the app. So that data will automatically update into the passport. You don't need to scan a QR code. It's just as the just an Internet of Things, as the battery gets connected to the app, then that app uploads into the passport, this dynamic data. But when the battery is done and say it goes back to the retailer and the retailer gets it to the recycler in some way, if that's the way, when the recycler then scans that QR code, that battery can then be decommissioned And so then we have a very accurate tracking of how many and which batteries are getting recycled, where they're going back to, how long are they in use for. And when is a rider, this is where it gets pretty interesting for brands and retailers around when is a rider saying that the performance isn't good enough anymore and they want to buy a new battery. Now you can actually see how many charge cycles was it, how long was it in use, were there any traumatic accidents that happened to it, like did it get too cold or too hot at any point in time. All of this information is stored, and you can then, as a product person or as a retailer, check in and say, you know, this doesn't seem like a very good quality battery. People keep bringing it back to me at this life cycle. How can we then improve that? How can you then talk to your brands and ask them, hey, can we get some improved performance here? And this is where that conversation goes back to, hey, what brands do you want in your store? Are they ones, are they going to have a passport on them? Yes or no? So the opportunity here that we kind of see in Europe anyway, and I'm really curious to see how the United States will adopt the passport, maybe not necessarily in a legal framework, but from a groundswell, if riders know that this exists, or if manufacturers that are selling both in Europe and in the United States, if they choose to have batteries, I mean, it makes sense to have the same batteries in both places, but some may have different batteries for different places. What does that mean? So in Europe, we're looking at it as a battery marketplace. So you'll be able to have a standardized pricing. So at what point, if it's 60%, 40% of the battery is used, you've got 60% less. What is a standard price for that? So now when a rider goes to buy a secondhand bike, there's a range that they can look at the value of that battery now, and they can also say, I'm probably going to have to change it in a year or two based on my usage. So this is what I think, maybe the new price should be this. So it gives the buyer a little bit more information. It's not such a black box, literally a black box on the bike of how long is this thing going to last, but they have more information on it. And then, you can get like a blue book, a Kelly Blue Book, if you will, of battery prices. Again, we talked about recycling, we talked about value determination. Product differentiation, I think, is a really interesting one. I have not heard yet of any brands that will actively post the QR code on their website and show riders, give riders access to the model of battery that's going to be on there and what its average carbon footprint is. But I could imagine that might be a nice thing for them to do. And when you start looking at it that way, again, it's an additional product differentiator that we hadn't had before in the past, where it used to be it's torque, it's range, if you can calculate it well, and it's watt hours. It's like, that doesn't tell you anything about the quality of what's inside. And so this really helps, bring that apart and show you a little bit more. Not perfect, but it's a stepping stone. You can also maybe do a battery upsell at one point, and then quality control. It really helps riders understand, what they're purchasing. There's also a little thing in there about anti-theft. That's something, we know that batteries, at least in Europe, batteries get stolen off of bikes. And this is absolutely something that now if a battery is coming back into place, we can match it back to the bike pretty easily. The QR code is literally like etched in. It's not just a sticker, it's like etched in so it can't come off like the other labeling stickers. So yeah, that's kind of, it's not part of the passport, but for the industry, that's what they'd like to use the passport for. And if you want, you can have this QR code. It takes you to a passport demonstrator, and I will go ahead and actually just bring that up quickly. So you can still see this, yeah. So this is what potentially a rider would come into. They scan a QR code, they come in, this is the unique identification for that individual battery. And then it can tell them different things, material compositions. Oh, you're not allowed to see material composition. So if you want to, you can ask to be authenticated. This is the performance. They haven't developed that yet. It's coming. compliance. This is the link to conformity. You can include additional documents there. The declaration of conformity, the supply chain, your due diligence report, sustainability report, third party. And then I think what everyone wants to see, yeah, okay, this is what we're looking at for carbon footprint. These are from raw material extraction, the main production, the distribution, and the recycling. So what part of the supply chain is carbon footprint coming from? And this is mandated. Like, this isn't going to be optional. If you're going to sell e-bikes in Europe, this is going to have to be on your batteries. And I think for a lot of manufacturers, the batteries are going to be interchangeable between the US and Europe. And therefore, there's a solid chance that you'll see these batteries with QR codes coming into your supply chain. And I would just ask that you start talking to your suppliers about it. What are they doing about this? What are maybe some creative solutions that the US can use the passport for that maybe Europe isn't going to use the passport for because it's not a regulation? So maybe there's things that are good, but it's a really exciting time. We can, like I said, we can build the fields as we want in addition to the 97 that already exist. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Excellent. April, really thankful for your presentation. So much insight that you bring to this discussion. I appreciate you sharing the QR code with the attendees. Panel members, any questions for April? All right.
I think Kuno's trying to speak, but it's too quiet.
Yes, sorry, I think I was muted. The biggest challenge in having a same battery across Europe and the US is, believe it or not, just the amount of real estate and the amount of labeling that is required by all the different regulations that exist today. I mean, there's no technical challenge. It's just the amount of labels. You have to abide by the minimum size requirements, and there's just not enough space. And I hope this challenge can be overcome someday, but currently it's a big challenge.
We actually were asking the other day with the commission speaking about, hey, can we just put all of the labels, like all of the other standards and conformities and symbols into the passport, even if it's not European, so that everything is in there? To your point, it's getting ridiculous with how many, yeah, there's not enough real estate on the battery for it. You're totally right.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to see where this goes, and it could provide so much insight, as you pointed out, April, and there's so many benefits, potential benefits. So appreciate your relationship with the NBDA and the work you're doing. And yeah, let's turn it over now. Sorry, everyone, we went a little bit over today, but such great information. I just had to just keep it going. Mike Frintz from Human Powered Solutions is going to do a wrap up and summary of today's discussion. Mike?
Wow, I've got to go take a nap. This was information overload. On behalf of NBDA, thank you to all the participants and all of the incredibly important, valid, true information that was conveyed during this hour and a half session. Just a couple of comments. I too was at the EPA meeting with Mark, talking about the various issues and challenges associated with recycling batteries. It's an incredibly important topic that we as an industry need to pay close attention to. I'm a little concerned, and maybe Mark, it was good or not good to spend a lot of time dwelling on it, is the uncertainty in the government right now. The EPA representatives, when they made their presentations, talked about the millions and millions and millions of dollars that were being put into recycling as a process, into the infrastructure, and as encouragements and incentives to companies to actively facilitate recycling of these lithium-ion batteries, not only to mitigate the danger, but also to recover the very valuable minerals that April referenced during her presentation. And right now, all of that's in question, obviously, and we all need to pay particularly close attention to see what's going to transpire, because it will impact us one way or another. Regarding the speakers that talked about dealer responsibilities associated with enhancing the safety of our consumers, they're the people that pay our checks, the people that buy our products and use our products, and we need to do every possible thing that we can to ensure their safe and enjoyable experiences. And with e-bikes in particular, safety is so critically important. As we all acknowledge, e-bikes are heavier, they go faster, a lot more kinetic energy involved. They're mixing with pedestrians in certain environments. Safety has to be paramount. And as I've said so many times in so many presentations that we've made over the years, education is the best tool at this juncture. Until technology can solve our problems, education is the best defense against an unpleasant or an unsafe experience, and that's education up and down the chain. Everybody from consumers to retailers to distributors to brands to manufacturers, the whole nine yards. We all have to be acutely aware of the fact that improper use, improper maintenance, it can be and has been extremely dangerous with respect to these wonderful products. And we cannot let these bad experiences hinder the proliferation of this marvelously wonderful category of product. E-bikes address so many of society's issues nowadays that doing anything that hinders their widespread proliferation is tragic. And unfortunately, I think unsafe use and the publication or the publicizing the incidents in which people are hurt or killed or buildings are burned down, whatever it might be, is extremely detrimental. I mean, in some of my earlier presentations, at cabinet presentations, I showed a video. It was a clip that was prepared by the FDNY Fire Department in New York City about some of the experiences that people have had to go through relative to fires. And it's a minuscule portion, a very, very minuscule portion of the product population that's out there. But it gets so much publicity and it's so dramatic and it's so tragic that it gets blown out of proportion. Well, we need to stamp that out just as aggressively as anything. So everything that we can do to train and advise people relative to what's proper. I've said it many times, the proper care and use of these products ensures safety. Luke, you're my new best friend. that NBDA publication that you referred to relative to the bold points, I wrote that. And I believe it in my heart's content. I've been involved in electric bikes since 1987, and I follow those rules myself, and I've never had a bad experience. So we need to do just that. And again, Luke, I take very much the same perspective that you do. My early responsibilities at Schwinn were in product compliance, product liability prevention, and product liability defense. And the key here, and I think you addressing it, is product liability prevention. Nobody likes to get subpoenaed to go to court to testify before a jury relative to some act or some occurrence that transpired. So product liability prevention is key, and we can prevent that liability up front. We can be proactive and prevent it from happening in the first place by engaging with our consumers and advising them what they should do and what they should not do relative to these wonderful products. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. The more aggressive that we can be, the better. And William, I think you brought up the idea of sending an email, so that you've got a document relative to the fact that you did provide important information that had it been followed, it wouldn't have happened in the first place, is going to be an extremely effective defense. Failure to warn is probably the single most utilized prosecutorial, if that's the right word, approach that plaintiff's attorneys take. You didn't tell my customer what to do and what not to do, and therefore you are liable. Well, the easy way around it is tell them what to do, tell them what not to do. And NBDA and Human Product Solutions, we will facilitate that effort as best we can, because we've got a lot of experience and expertise in these areas, and we'll continue to offer that in any venue that we can. And finally, April, you and I spoke just before that January EPA meeting, and I carried your message to a lot of the participants at the EPA meeting relative to the importance and value of the digital product passport. And the reaction that I got generally was, oh, that's impossible. That's never going to happen. It's too much information. It's too much work. Well, I think the presentation that you just made is key to helping people understand that, hey, it's not necessarily that bad, and the effort that's put in up front pays off in spades down the road as we can maintain a pedigree, if you will, of what these products have, from conception through production, through distribution, through service, through use, through end of life. If they can understand how valuable having a paper trail, that's not really a paper trail, a digital trail if you want, would be so valuable to everyone. And I think it's incumbent upon us to start spreading that message that you so eloquently put forth at this meeting today. And again, I think, you know, we talked about it. We talked about it when you and I spoke individually. We need to engage Heather. We need to engage Jay. We need to engage the NBDA in general and come up with very proactive presentations at all of the forums that we participate in to get this message across, because this is wonderful. And I'd like to take it a step further and to address Kunal's point, wouldn't it be great if we could fold everything into a single digital code to put on a battery pack, include everything, include an owner's manual, include instructions relative to what the consumer should do when it's time to recycle. And you know, we live in a digital age, and you know, we don't have to rely on memory anymore. We don't have to rely on books and printed things. Not to say that those are bad in general, but if we can point our phone at a little square on whatever product it might be and procure all of the relevant information that's stored and sorted in a logical format to make it easy to digest, man, that's, you know, that's what technology is all about, making life better, making life safer. And again, thank you to everybody. This was incredible. I hope we can continue this forum on a regular basis for the foreseeable future, because the information conveyed here was a lot more important than any of us may individually realize, because it's going to help for a better future. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, it's so nice to have, Mark come and share what was said at the EPA event, which I did post a link to the one coming up in March for everyone to hear the viewpoints on how we can help riders enjoy their e-bikes safely, that rider education piece, and then to have April come and share about the passport. There's a lot of information here, and this panel exists so we can share the information, get those important conversations happening, and just kind of see where it goes from there. To our panel members, thank you. To our attendees, thank you as well. Our next event is Tuesday, June 10th. The NBDA will be in touch as we get closer for topic suggestions and different ideas to bring forward to the next event. Have a great afternoon. Thank you for your energy, for your expertise. Always great to see everyone, and we really do appreciate you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks,